A few weeks into summer, right after I finished high school, I found myself in that sweet spot of freedom. No job or schoolwork weighing me down. It was my first and likely only summer without obligations, and everyone knows those early summer days are pure magic. I was absolutely thriving. In Wyoming, there's this thing where recent grads head out to plateaus for some rock climbing. I'm not sure if it's a widespread tradition or just something my school does, but I like to imagine it's a thing everywhere. It's like a rite of passage, a way to celebrate your newfound freedom with a mix of skill and courage. My friends and I have been buzzing about it for weeks, and we finally set a date to make it happen. It seemed like the ideal way to launch what I hoped would be a legendary summer break. The crew was me, Alexandra, Nick, and Jack, buddies since middle school. Alex had the only car reliable enough for the trip, a Jeep she adored and was always eager to take off-road. She was also our sober driver, which was perfect since the rest of us planned to crack open some beers to toast at the top of whatever plateau we picked to climb. Our plan was to hit the Flaming Gorge lookout first, then cruise through the plateau region to scout a climbing spot. The lookout was breathtaking, one of those views that reminds you why Wyoming is home. We spent about an hour snapping photos and soaking it all in before heading back toward Route 80, driving slowly to spot a good place to climb. While rolling along Highway 141, we noticed an awesome area just off the road. Huge rock formations that looked perfect for climbing. Not too intense, but enough of a challenge to make it worthwhile. Alex pulled into a small gravel lot, and we grabbed our gear, stuffing our backpacks with drinks. The plateau we chose was about a 15-minute climb, a steady scramble with plenty of handholds and footholds to keep it doable. I've got tons of photos from that day, mostly because Alex demanded we take a zillion shots of her, and I'll share a few. Alex led the way since she was the most seasoned climber, with me, Nick, and Jack following in that order. The view from the summit was unreal. Endless Wyoming wilderness, stretching out in every direction. We popped open our beers, sat back, and chatted about a friend from school, just savoring the moment. I was gazing out at the landscape, lost in the scenery, when I spotted a red pickup truck speeding down the highway. To my shock, it slammed on the brakes right after passing Alex's Jeep and started reversing in the middle of the road. I pointed it out to my friends, and we all fell quiet, wondering what was up. The truck backed up until it could turn into our parking lot, and did just that. We watched as a man got out. From our vantage point, we could tell he was tall and broad, but details were hard to make out. At first, we figured he might be another climber or hiker, maybe just stopping to rest. But then he started circling Alex's Jeep in a way that felt off, peering into the windows, tugging at the door handles, inspecting it like he was up to no good. That's when Nick shouted, "Hey!" from the plateau to let him know the car was unattended. The guy flinched and looked around, clearly confused about where the voice came from. When he finally spotted us up top, he waved, and we thought that might be the end of it, assuming he'd hop back in his truck and leave, knowing he was being watched. But to our surprise, he kept messing with Alex's Jeep. Jack, probably not thinking it through, yelled that we were armed, a bluff, since we had no weapons. I thought it was a risky move, but I figured he hoped it would scare the guy off. Instead, the man shouted back something chilling. "Me too, kiddo." He held something up and waved it around. Maybe a gun, though I couldn't tell from that distance. What happened next felt like a bad dream. The man started slamming his shoulder and elbow into the Jeep's windows, clearly trying to break in. We could hear the thuds from where we sat. Alex was livid, screaming at him to leave her car alone, and we all joined in, shouting and making as much noise as we could while scrambling down the plateau as fast as was safe. I've never descended anything so quickly. By the time we heard glass shatter, we'd reached the ground and were sprinting toward the Jeep. The man saw us coming, yelled for us to stop, and pointed what I could now confirm was a gun right at us. We froze, hands up. He ordered us to toss our phones and wallets on the ground, and we complied immediately. Then he told us to back away while he grabbed our stuff, keeping the gun aimed at us the whole time. I was close enough to see his face clearly. An older white guy, maybe in his 50s, with a scruffy beard and weathered features, but nothing distinctive enough to pick him out of a lineup. After grabbing our things, he pulled out a knife, slashed one of Alex's tires, and walked back to his pickup truck. which I noticed had no license plates, and drove off without another word. Alex was furious, and I couldn't blame her. I was mostly shaken from the gunpoint encounter, but I'd have been just as mad if it were my car. Not only had he robbed us and damaged the Jeep, but we couldn't call the police or chase him since he'd taken our phones and disabled the vehicle. Jack and I swapped out the tire as fast as we could, but we all knew we'd never catch up. Once we were back on the road, Alex floored in the direction the truck had gone, but he was long gone. We gave up quickly. Nick knew the way back to town like the back of his hand, so we headed home to figure out our next move. At Alex's house, we used her mom's phone to call the police, giving them a description of the man and his truck, without plates or any solid identifying details, though there wasn't much they could do beyond keeping an eye out. We never heard back from them, and as far as I know, the guy was never caught. It completely wrecked what should have been one of the best days of our summer, and none of us felt safe venturing out to remote spots like that for months afterward. I know I didn't. Music. I'm Sophia, and this happened 3 years ago when I was 19. My older brother Luke had just graduated college in California, and we were driving cross-country back to New Jersey. He'd been out there for 4 years and had collected a ton of stuff. Furniture, electronics, books, you name it. There was no way he could fly it all back. But that wasn't the real reason for the trip. A cross-country road trip? Count me in any day. I saw it as a summer adventure, maybe even better than a vacation. We could have taken a straight shot to Nevada and Colorado, but Luke wanted to explore more of the country he'd been studying, and I'd never seen places like Zion or the Grand Canyon, so we opted for the scenic southern route. Luke was adamant about hiring a U-Haul rather than mailing our stuff or ditching it all to buy new things once we got home. Truth be told, I suspect he was pinching pennies in every corner, just like any recent college grad scraping by. The truck wasn't massive, but it was plenty spacious, making me feel like we were piloting a mini semi across the nation. Prior to hitting the road, our folks and nearly every online travel board we checked issued the identical caution: watch yourselves in New Mexico. The state as a whole wasn't a hotbed of peril, yet tales abounded of cons aimed at road trippers, plus theft in certain backwater villages, and overall shady vibes in the isolated sandy expanses. Dad in particular urged us to bypass it entirely unless desperate, and even then, to hit only big-name fuel stops before hightailing it back to the interstate. Luke and I vowed to blast right through New Mexico, no pit stops. We'd top off in Arizona, zip across at top speed, and pause again upon entering Texas. It struck us as a solid strategy. The initial leg of the journey was phenomenal. Zion blew me away, and the Grand Canyon lived up to every dream I'd harbored. Cruising Arizona turned out to be surprisingly stunning, in a manner that caught me off guard. Yet midway through New Mexico's barren expanse, everything unraveled. The U-Haul guzzled fuel way more than Luke had figured, with the needle plummeting quicker than our estimates. Looking back, it was a touch foolish to bank on crossing the entire state without refueling. We scanned for the upcoming station on the route, but the GPS pegged it at roughly 40 miles off. The tank was already under a quarter full, and Luke grew jittery about clearing the distance. He eased onto the shoulder to scan the map, and that's when it hit us. We had 0 options. A little settlement lay about 10 miles up, marked on the GPS with a gas stop. Far from perfect, but preferable to stranding ourselves dry in the wasteland. The place was minuscule, home to maybe a couple hundred souls at most. It carried that eerie hush some desert hamlets possess, as if the residents were all hunkered indoors evading the sun, despite the mild warmth that afternoon. A handful of weather structures lined a modest central drag, and that was about it. No fellow motorists or passers-by caught our eye, which struck us as odd given our proximity to a key thoroughfare. The fuel spot was your standard outpost, with a couple pumps linked to a modest mini-mart. While Luke pumped gas, I picked up on peculiar glances from the sparse townsfolk milling about. Not hostile, merely prolonged gazes that left me uneasy. One fellow propped against the store, puffing a smoke, kept locking eyes with me, and I had to will myself to avert my stare. I chalked it up to our outsider status, hauling a U-Haul sporting California tags, but zilch went down. Once Luke wrapped up at the pump, I aimed to guide us highway bound. That ought to have been straightforward. From spots in town, We could spot the interstate plain as day, yet each path we chose veered us deeper astray. Bizarrely enough, we'd head straight for the known route, only for the way to bend, terminate, or veer utterly off course. It felt as if the whole bird was engineered to thwart us, absurd as that may ring. And no, before you wonder about the GPS, we were relying on it, or attempting to, but it proved useless. Evidently, Google hadn't refreshed that zone in forever, steering us to vanished paths or utterly blocked ones. Compounding matters, the reception was barely there. It flickered in short bursts, then blanked out for long stretches. We looped those same blocks repeatedly, my nerves fraying by the second. Luke aimed for composure, but his irritation seeped through. The vibe grew ever more off-kilter, as though an intangible repellent in that spot was enforcing the warnings we'd ignored. Words failed to capture it, but glimpsing the highway so near, yet forever out of grasp, was profoundly weird and chilling. 20 minutes of aimless circling later, Luke opted to circle back to the station and seek old-school guidance. I pleaded against it, but he snapped that we were ensnared in the very forbidden zone. Panic edged his voice, so I zipped it back at the pumps. He ducked inside as I sat in the van. Emerging, his face etched with concern. Sliding in, he explained the attendant's route. 17 miles counter to highway via dusty trails, circling to an eventual merge point. I gawked at him, dumbfounded. Why trek 17 miles backward when the road loomed visible from our seats? Probing Luke on the clerk's demeanor, he admitted the man came off cordial, yet his overzealous certainty about the detour rang false, like a sales pitch for the sole viable path. Luke added that the worker had grilled him on our destination and trip length. Before I uttered a word, Luke declared, "I don't buy it at all. We got a bolt from this dump." He gunned it without protest from me. Soon, he halted on a hushed lane to regroup. The GPS remained glitchy and my breaths quickened toward panic. A nagging voice whispered doom was imminent. Right on cue, a grit cake truck sidled up. My pulse hammered. I glanced at Luke, who seemed coiled to peel out if needed. The driver's pain descended, inquiring if we'd stalled or misplaced ourselves. Luke eyed him steadily, assessing threats. Before replying, from the passenger perch, I fought to steady my inhalations. That's my terror level. Solo, I'd have been lost. After the standoff, Luke mentioned our highway quest, reciting the intended path, the clerk's very counsel. My angle on the stranger was limited, but his shift of gravity upon hearing it was unmistakable. He queried if we were out of our minds and warned against that path at all costs. It led, he claimed, to a forsaken zone rumored as a narcotics corridor. Offering counter-guidance instead, he marveled we'd dodged robbery thus far, given our greenhorn aura and glaring U-Haul beacon. Then, sans our gratitude, he vanished. Luke and I fell mute. He simply followed the new leads. Indeed, a mile from town sat an obscure dirt track, the wonkiest, most indirect ramp imaginable, yet it twisted us onto the highway after a spell and a story. We chatted lightly on it later, but neither craved dwelling. We chuckle over these days, and kin prod us to recount at gatherings, yet then it ranked as our creepiest ordeal. That intangible aura lingers in memory, a cocktail of foreboding, expectancy, and fret fused tight. My sibling likened it to a gasping interlude, not yet asphyxiating, but its shadow looming. I'd shun that sensation forever. Music, this unfolded 5 years back, precisely 5 summers past. My then girlfriend, let's dub her P.S., had freshly earned her degree, me a year ahead. We're split now, but no grudges linger, and I cherish every moment of us, breakup notwithstanding. She was biracial, Croatian on one side, Brazilian on the other. We'd long daydreamed of a European jaunt post-graduation. One P.S. trait stands out. Once committed, she'd bulldoze obstacles relentlessly. Blamed the Latin fire, my standing quip, that defined her. Post-ceremony, we dove into scheming our dream getaway. One hitch loomed large. We were flat busted, forcing a bargain basement approach. Our finalized route was bold for paupers. A week in Croatia capped by 2 evenings in Rijeka, her grandparents' ancestral burg. She'd yet to visit, but tales from Grandma had fueled her zeal to trace roots. Penny pinching extreme, we skipped plush-ins or solid crash pads. We snagged the rock-bottom Arabs motels available last minute. Think single-star ratings and grainy shots like from ancient cell cams, but enthusiasm trumped qualms. We were thrilled just to launch. Zagreb and Zadar dazzled despite skimps. Throngs of visitors aided anonymity, cheap eats, and gratis pursuits. Rijeka diverged, though, a northern seaside hub, watery yet no sandy paradise. Crucially, it shunned tourist hordes. Strolling, P.S., and I stood out as prime outsiders. That alone screamed warning, but we embraced the rawness. Her Croatian sufficed for basics, not masterful but serviceable, while I gleaned phrases en route. Day one blurred into rambles, chatting natives, basking in unvarnished Croatian life absent from crowded hubs. P.S. has that effortless ability to chat with just about anybody, and since I'm no stranger to conversation myself, we were thoroughly enjoying ourselves, striking up talks with store owners and folks we passed on the sidewalks. People came across as welcoming overall, even if I picked up on a few prolonged glances our way. Not the typical intrigued stares that visitors often draw. These carried a sharper edge, something more piercing, but Piaz appeared unfazed by them, which led me to chalk it up to my own overactive imagination. Come our second day, we chose to push a bit beyond the downtown hub in search of a genuine spot for midday meals. Piaz had picked up a tip from a fellow guest at our Airbnb about this modest dining neighborhood. No frills involved, merely a community spot rumored to boast exceptional seafood joints. It lay roughly a quarter-hour stroll from the heart of town, winding through neighborhood lanes that grew noticeably hushed the deeper we ventured from the bustling core. The eatery turned out to be utterly unremarkable, a compact structure holding just a few seats within and a basic, scrawled list of dishes affixed to the glass. Yet the instant we stepped inside, I sensed Piaz's intel on the cuisine had hit the mark. The aroma hit like a revelation, and it was plain that every dish came straight from fresh, hands-on preparation. We claimed a spot by the pane and dove in with excessive orders, charred seafood, a pasta dish loaded with ocean catches, loaves of bread, plus a flask of regional vintage priced at around €3. I recall musing that we'd unearthed a true gem. The flavors exploded with excellence, surpassing every bite from the crowded visitor haunts, all for a fraction of the expense. Midway through, as we savored our plates, I realized a cluster of 5 fellows had entered and taken seats merely 2 spots over. They had that hardened vibe, the sort that makes you veer across traffic in any locale. Still, they merely settled in for their meals, seeming oblivious to our presence, or so it appeared. I was mildly shocked that they'd slipped under my radar sooner. Likely, I'd been utterly absorbed in the delectable bites or lost in my exchange with my partner. It didn't register as noteworthy, so I resumed my fork work, though I did find their boisterous chatter somewhat grating. We were roughly midway in our feast, lost in easy banter and delight, when Piaz abruptly fell silent. Her gaze drifted beyond me to the rear of the spot, zeroing in on that bunch, and I caught the subtle hardening in her features. Without waiting for my query on her sudden hush, she bent forward over the tabletop and murmured that we had to exit immediately. I hissed a soft challenge, probing what on earth she meant, yet she was already fumbling for her bag. She insisted it was no drill, and the tremor in her tone signaled I should heed her without question. The puzzle of it all escaped me still, but she's never one to overreact without cause. Fluid in the tongue, steeped deeper into customs than I could claim. If escape was her call, solid ground surely backed it. I fished out a wad of Cunin notes and flung them down, far exceeding the tab, and trailed her exit-ward. Throughout, I braced for her run-down, but she merely quickened her stride, tugging me onward by the wrist. Only once we burst into the open air did I press her firmly for answers. She peered back at the venue and revealed she caught snippets of the men's exchange. They were plotting moves against us, zeroing in on her above all. A faint quiver laced her words, spiking my alarm higher than the rest. She'd overheard plans to split us apart initially, with some fellow called Lucas slated to handle the rest. Identity be damned. She shared further details I won't echo here, but the gist rang utterly unambiguous. Haste back to the crowded town core was imperative. I venture they could have been jesting, Yet she dismissed it, stressing their words framed certainties, not whims. She conveyed a sense that their scheme felt habitual, not some idle reverie. Her conviction swayed me fully. That's precisely when I erred by twisting for a backward peek. The entire quintet loomed just beyond the threshold now, eyes locked on us with zero pretense of discretion. The second our glances met, they lurched forward in our path. I clasped her palm and alerted her to the pursuit. No further exchange needed. We bolted outright. No mere trot or brisk pace, but flat-out dash aimed at the urban pulse. Trouble was, the distance to the lively zone dwarfed my estimate, and the route ahead consisted largely of deserted home-line stretches. Footfalls echoed in our wake, and a swift rearward scan confirmed the five were in hot chase. No feigning left. They barreled after us openly through the lanes. Pure, unadulterated fright gripped the scene. Piaz outpaced me fitness-wise, but raw surge kept me level. Somehow, we pounded on for an eternity, it seemed, veering into haphazard alleys in blind faith of progress. At last, after perhaps a decade of minutes in the fiercest exertion I'd ever known, human figures dotted the paths ahead, and vehicle hums swelled. The pack halted their hunt the moment we merged with the throng. One final glance over my shoulder showed them rooted 2 blocks off, still observing, yet holding distance, as if boundaries of onlookers thwarted their scheme. Breath ragged, forms quaking from the rush, we both reeled. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought to mask them. I'd never witnessed such raw fear in her, amplifying the ordeal's stark reality. We ducked into a cafe off the Central Plaza, collapsing into seats to unpack the chaos. That's when a senior local at the adjoining table, having caught our English murmurs, angled in to check on our welfare. Our recounting drew a grave headshake and a blunt label of fools, not harshly, but with disbelief at our innocence. He warned that sightseers ought never roam unescorted in that district, least of all blatant outsiders like ourselves. P.S. sketched the venue in question, and his face darkened further. His disclosure left me reeling, vision blurring. He'd pegged it as a notorious den for neighborhood thugs, tied to a syndicate running shadows in the vicinity. Authentic worry etched him, as if we'd skirted a dire abyss by inches. I floated alerting the cops, earning only a wry chuckle, sans details. He settled his tab and vanished from the spot soon after. Piaz and I scarce delayed beyond regaining wind. We rose and beeline for our lodging. The trip's remainder lay in tatters. Jitters confined us indoors save for central area takeout runs. Our final stretch past Huddle Within, laptop stream shows our sole diversion. Ticking off flight time. In retrospect, profound thanks flood me for Piaz's sharp instincts in extracting us then. Absent her grasp of their mutterings or any flicker delay, outcomes defy conjecture. Such brushes etch how swiftly routine unravels into peril, amplified in alien turf blind to undercurrents. Candidly, lingering self-reproach nags of my lax foreign jaunt. Awareness dawns that such nonchalance ranks among gravest risks, doubly if your face screams stranger. Post-return, the episode faded from chatter, yet its ripples touched us both. Piaz's intrepid wanderlust wants to find her, but that Rhea episode reshaped her caution, I know, for forged mine indelibly.